Welcome to another session sitting with DJ Lob-EZ. No rap today, kids. DJ Lob-EZ's tired. It's been a long day, so I want to get through this chapter 17.2, Agricultural and Industrial Revolution. And away we go. First thing we want to talk about is open field systems. Pretty much all through the Middle Ages. The agricultural system was set up in what is known as an open field system, where the land was divided into a number of different strips of land. And those strips of land they were kind of corresponded to the various peasants. And depending on, I guess, how successful or wealthy those individual peasants would kind of determine how many different strips of land that they had. But one of the things that we need to understand about the open field system is that it was cooperative, meaning all of the peasants worked together. All right, and that meant at the beginning, when they would sow the seed, where they'd follow behind the plow and plant the seeds, and also at the end of the growing season, and that's called harvesting. All right, and so they would harvest all their crops, and this system was not terribly efficient. All right, and that's because for the roughly 1,000 or so years that this open field system existed, 1,000 years. How long is that? Is that a century? No. I think it's called like millennium or something. Anyway, for about this 1,000 years or so, what we would get is very little innovation. All right, that means changes. And the reason being is because, these peasants weren't very well educated, and they're a little superstitious, and they feared change. So they kind of work it out amongst themselves, what type of crops they are going to plant, and then they get after it. And it was real nice because they all worked together. So it kind of lessened everybody's workload. And the fields were open, meaning no fences, no hedges, nothing to enclose their land. So everybody kind of knew who owned what strip of land, and basically at the end of the harvest, you'd get everybody would kind of help you gather up your crops, and then you got everything that you grew, and you do the same thing for your neighbors. So big problem though is if you is a farmer and you're constantly growing the same crop in the same strip of land, you're going to suck up all the nutrients, and eventually that land's not going to be too doggone productive. So exhaustion of soil was a constant problem. And so they, somewhere during the Middle Ages, they figured out a way to rotate crops. 1, 2, 3. All right. And it was called three field system. And they'd kind of alternate crops, planting different things on the various plots of land. And some year you might plant yourself some wheat, and then you'd use that wheat, and you would take it down to the mill, and you would grind it down into some flour. And then you have plenty of bread to eat. Them Europeans used to eat about 2 pounds of bread a day. That's a lot of bread. I think about eating 2 pounds of anything, it just gives me a stomach ache. All right. Well, unless there's, I don't know, you put a lot of butter on it. Maybe I eat 2 pounds of something if you put butter on it. I probably eat 2 pounds of bacon. I like bacon. Bacon's good. It's not really good for you. Clog up your arteries and start having heart palpitations and stuff like that. And you don't want that. So got to get out on a treadmill once in a while and get a little workout. All right. Anyway, back to what we're talking about. What are we talking about? Oh, talking about how to make the land or how to maintain the productive nature of the soil. All right. And so you're looking at this picture of these weeds right out in this field. Well, that's all very purposeful. Those aren't crops. Those are kind of wild or native grasses. And so what they do is every third year they let the land rest. All right. The land get tired and need a nap sometimes. So it's called leaving it fallow. All right. And so what they figured out is over time is if you plant certain types of grasses, that'll help restore the nutrients into the soil. All right. One of the big nutrients that the soil needs is something called nitrogen. Okay. Not nitroglycerin, because that would blow a big hole in your field. You probably don't want that. All right. So nitrogen is naturally occurring in certain grasses like clover. Anyway, if you let that land rest, it'll be more productive the following year. Right? You know what I'm saying? All right. And better yet, if you got some animals, you can put those animals out to pasture. All right. And they're going to eat all that grass. And then eventually they're going to go to the bathroom. All right. And what comes out is called manure. And, well, the land loves manure. All right. And that adds that nutrients right back to the soil. All right. Cycle of life. All right. Cycle of life. Yeah. We can sing that song from The Lion King. You want to do that? No? All right. Well, I got a good singing voice. Anytime you want me to sing, I'll sing. But anyway, leave that land fallow. All right. And what? Look at this. I got some scriptures here for you that you could read. Talking about in Old Testament, Exodus, saying how the Bible advises that you need to let your land rest, just like Yahweh recommended that everybody kind of rest on the Sabbath. Right? You shouldn't do any kind of work. You should just rest, and that's on the seventh day. And so the Bible says you should let your land rest at least once every 7 years. Well, for like the whole year. That's not necessarily what they do. Sometimes they just let the land grow or lay fallow for a season, not a whole year. And they do it every 3 years, not every 7, like the Bible says. Anyway, when they would do that, oh, look at these nice little pictures here. All right. Well, anybody know what this is? I bet you don't. I know what you know that. Well, you probably know it. Well, hold on. Let's go back to this one. This is barley. Okay. Barley, you can put that in bread and you can put that in stew. What else they use it for? Beer. Yeah, but you're not old enough to drink that. So, that's conversation for another time. But over here is stuff you guys don't like to eat. They're called vegetables, green things, peas. I like peas. Peas are pretty good. If you can put them in with something else, because they don't taste all that great. And there's some peanuts, and these are some legumes or beans. So what you do is you rotate different crops, different years, and that helps you kind of trick the soil, all right? So don't get too exhausted. And down here is oats. All right? Anybody ever eat oatmeal? My daddy used to make that for me in the morning on cold mornings. Yeah, put a little brown sugar on it. Pretty good. Anyway, this was basically some of the crops that they would plant on a regular basis. All right, keep the soil from becoming too exhausted. And this here is a picture of an old. Well, it is an actual picture, and it's colored, so that must mean it's fairly recent. But this is an open field system, all right, and so you can see where the little strips of land used to be. Okay, and this is over 1,000 years old, so it's kind of cool. But anyway, like I said, animals would be allowed to, well, even after the harvest, they put the animals out on the pasture and they'd eat all the stubble. And, they're constantly go in the bathroom, and so that's helping helping the nutritional value of the soil. All right, so I got a bunch of pictures here of different types of open field systems, and you can kind of see some of the different features that these open fields have. I'm not going to talk about that too much because I think we was going to do an assignment where you're going to kind of create your own open field system. So I thought it would be nice to include these on here for your viewing pleasure, and you can certainly refer back to them. And maybe I'll put the actual, well, of course I'm going to put the video up, but maybe I'll put the PowerPoint up too, put it on Schoology, or some of you like to call it Schoology. Yeah, some of you guys don't know how to pronounce words too well. I won't name names, but you all know who you are. All right, so here's another one. That was one I used earlier, and there's another one. Okay, and then even telling you like what to plant on which field and what year and this, that, and the other thing. It's kind of helpful. I like this one. This one's kind of pretty. It takes a different view. It's not bird's eye view. It's kind of from an angle, but you see all the different features. And what's this? Anybody know what this is? Right down here. It's called a water meal. All right. And what do they do at the meal? Anybody know what they do at the meal? Rashith, do you know? I'll give you a second. What's that you say? They take the power of the stream, does what? It turns the water wheel. And what does it do, Rashith? Well, that's right. It powers a little stone, a grinding stone, and that stone goes around and around and around on top of another stone. It's like big old stone on top, one stone on top of the other, and it spins around in a circle, and you feed your grain inside of it. And what's it do? It creates friction, and that friction is going to grind that grain into flour. And what you going to use that flour for, Rashith? Yep, you're going to make some bread. And you got some cows over here, and you're going to milk those cows. And what you going to do with that? Well, you're going to turn that, put some mojo into it, and you're going to get you some butter. And then you put the butter on your bread, and everybody's happy. All right? So that's called a water meal. That's going to come in, that's going to be important here in just a little bit. When we talk about the Industrial Revolution, these water mills are going to be kind of an important feature of factories, stuff like that. All right. Okay. So at the end, what so you got a large landowner, probably owns most of the land. We call them the feudal lord or whatnot. Sometimes they were peasants that owned lots of strips of land just because of they were made some wise investments. Maybe they cheated in a game of cards and they was gambling each other's strips of land, and they were able to acquire more strips of land, and they become sort of wealthy. And over time, when we start talking about changes and innovations to agriculture, sometimes it was those wealthier peasants that were in favor of making changes and innovations, and those innovations were what the agricultural revolution is all about. All right. Anyway, these women right here, they're kind of poor, and how you know? Well, because they're digging in the dirt. All right, behind them, up on this big old wagon, and way off in the distance, these are the guys. This is right after harvest time. Well, they're taking the wheat, and they're going to sell that or divvy it up amongst themselves. But these poor women are following kind of behind, and what they're doing is they're picking through the stubble, trying to find little individual grains of wheat, and that whole process called gleaning. And there's a real famous Frenchie. His name was Jean-Francois Millet. No, Jean-Francois Millet. Very famous French painter, and and it's called Gleaners. And basically what he's trying to do here, well, there's a whole different genre of art, and it's called realism, French realism, and trying to depict the harsh nature of agriculture during this period of time, and how these poor women barely eked out a survival in this process, although very backbreaking, was quite necessary for them to survive. And this painting is, because you're going to have to know this sooner or later, so we might as well know it now. One of the things about this painting is that it shows the differences that existed in a lot of these manners and this agricultural style known as the open field system. They got the rich and the poor, and look at the sun like shining down on them because they're all happy and rich, and then you got these poor ladies here, they're like in the shadows, and that's because they're poor. So light equal good and shadows equals bad, I guess, but they don't got it so good. Anyway, what do we say about happening about every 7 or 8 years, right? Who knows? Well, I know you know, Shantae. It's time to call on somebody else. Well, Rashith already answered. Let's ask Michael. You. Yeah, you. Michael, you. What happened about every 7 or 8 years? We know this. Yep. No, that's not right. Never mind. I should call on somebody else. Eric, tell Michael what happens. That's right. Crop failures. Maybe not enough rain, too much rain. Who knows? And that crop failure lead to famine and mass starvation. Okay. So one of the big disadvantages of this system was it didn't produce enough food. You know why? Because 1/3 of their land wasn't under cultivation. Okay. So that's inefficient. So, and not to mention they had all the woods and the pasture land too, and that land wasn't cultivated either. So wasn't good. That's one of the big things. All right, so starvation was just always right around the corner, and if you wasn't gonna be doing some of this gleaning, well, you just might not have enough food to eat. All right, and the other problem was they didn't have enough food for themselves, so let alone for their animals. So they had to butcher their animals. Okay, so their animal herds, whether they're pigs or sheep or cows or what have you, bunnies, pigeons. No, they didn't have that. But they didn't have enough food for them neither. So they'd have to butcher them. So the animal herds never were a very good source of meat. You know, they could maybe have a couple good meals, and then whatever was left, they'd have to salt and dry it and make like jerky out of it. I guess it's edible, but never had a lot of meat in their diet, therefore. And as a consequence, not very healthy. Gotta eat meat. Don't listen to all them vegans talking about meat's bad for you. Meat's good, especially bacon. Well, not good for you. We already talked about the arteries and whatnot, but here we go. Yeah, here's another painting by that Frenchie Millet. And again, you can see the nature of the work is pretty physically demanding. Okay, and people over in Eastern Europe, they had it even worse than people in Western Europe because the landowners were a lot meaner and required a lot more more days for their feudal obligations. But anyway, it don't matter where you're, Eastern Europe, Western Europe, it wasn't exactly a glamorous life being a peasant. So anyway, agricultural revolution, what we want to talk about is like where it started. Well, it started with the Dutch, the Netherlands, the Low Countries. We call them Low Countries. Anybody know why we call them the Low Countries? I bet you don't know. Well, wait a minute. Yeah, that's it, because they're below sea level, and there was a lot of flooding, so Low Countries. Anyway, the Dutch, because they were pretty innovative and go-getters, a lot of that was tied to their religion. Remember that? Calvinism and Protestant work ethic and whatnot. They developed some pretty ingenious ways to cultivate more land, and they figured out how to reclaim some of the land from the sea, and they built big old dikes and levees to hold back the sea, and they were pioneers in the agriculture. So anyway, they drained a bunch of land and figured out some other things too on how to better farm. All right. But we're going to talk a little bit about the Dutch, but they don't get too much credit because it was really the English that they studied what the Dutch had done, but then they kind of put their own spin job on it and made it better. So there's three things that we need to understand that is part of the agricultural revolution, and it's right down here where it says 4-field rotation system. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the seed drill and selective breeding. And another one is manure. That was like the fourth one, but it really doesn't quite count. Anyway, so here we go. First guy I want to talk about is Jethro Tull. See this little hayseed right here? That's a name you give to. That's not a very nice name to call anybody, but a hayseed is a name. Like if you ever think, call somebody like a redneck or something, like me. A hayseed is somebody who's kind of a simple person, usually a farmer, kind of superstition, not very educated. But anyway, this guy here is he's got this little sack over his shoulder, and he reaches in and grabs some seeds and he throws it out on the ground, just like that. And he's following the plow, and he's throwing those seeds, trying to get them right inside the grooves. And they're going to cover it up, and hopefully it'll germinate. Well, that's called broadcasting. And that system, not very efficient either, because sometimes it wouldn't go into the hole that it was supposed to, and seeds wouldn't germinate. They'd go to waste. All right? So really, that's not good. So what he did was, Jethro Tull, an Englishman, figured out a way to, he was good with mechanical stuff, and he had an inventive mind, and he figured out a way to attach this gadget to the back of a horse or an ox. It didn't matter, because a lot of times that's what they use. They didn't have horses all the time. They use oxen. They had a beast of burden. But this here little contraption called seed drill, you put all the seeds in here, and the plow would cut the grooves in the land, and you follow behind it, and it would deposit the seeds real strategic like, and you could set the depth and the spacing. And so what happened is larger amounts of the seeds would germinate, therefore your yield would be larger. It would boost it. Okay. So that's one of the let me turn the page here. I'm following along with my study guide. You probably should be doing the same thing. Follow along with your study guide. So, yep, I already did number 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, we're talking about number 5, Jethro Tull. All right, the manure barrier. It talks about how different types of fertilizers were experimented with, but basically it comes down to is animal dung or animal droppings, and more of it you can get on your land, the better it was for your soil. Okay, and they experimented with chemicals too, but for the most part it was the animal droppings or the poo-poo that they used to fertilize. Okay. So that's sort of important, but not as important as this one. Invention or innovation by Charles Townsend, not Townshend. Anybody wants to pronounce that H, for God's sakes. Just like I said, you guys don't pronounce the words best all the time. Anyway, he kind of studied and improved and perfected the Dutch system of the 4-field rotation system. So it's not 3, but 4. And you know what they figured out? They figured out a way that you don't have to let that land lie fallow. Yep. And so that meant all the land, instead of 1/3 of the land not being under cultivation, 100% of the land is under cultivation. So that means more food, right? Yes. And so what they would do is they'd experiment with different types of crops to put in there. And again, nitrogen is that very important nutrient that the soil needs. And so they were able to figure it out. Well, clover's good. you can't eat clover. The animals can, but not the humans. But like if they wanted to, for at least one of the seasons or one of the fields, use that, that meant the animals were going to have plenty of food. That animals got to eat too, right? And so they're fertilizing the ground and having plenty to eat. And then they figured out, well, there's other nitrogen fixing crops that you can plant, and that mostly are root plants. See a carrot there. They had carrots already in the old world, but because of the Columbian exchange, they brought in turnips from the New World as well as potatoes. All right. And what they figured out is these roots, they grew like crazy. And also, because they grew underground, you could plant those, you could plant those things in the winter and they still grow. All right. And so what they used them for initially was fodder. All right. Food for the livestock, fodder, Fodder. And so that meant they didn't have to slaughter their livestock, right? Because that was a disadvantage that they had in the open field system, is always having to kill all their animals, so they didn't have enough meat, and so barely had enough food to survive. But with this, they could keep their animals alive. So initially, when it came to, you don't want to eat turnips. I mean, I've had them, and I guess if you're starving, you'd eat them, but they don't taste very good. But potatoes, on the other hand, if you put plenty of butter on them, oh, like you died and gone to heaven. But they didn't eat them because it was for the animals. And so a lot of people would kind of look down their nose, especially the wealthy people. They didn't like to eat that peasant food, because the peasants eat what the animals eat. It would be like you eating dog food. Don't eat dog food. I know some of you probably tried it, but it's not good. But I guess if you're starving, you'd eat anything, but let's not talk about that. Anyway, don't eat dog food, all right? But they wouldn't eat the potatoes. But finally they figured out after what, you know what they also thought? They thought that the potato caused leprosy. Give you all those pimples on your face and make your fingers fall off. And, well, it don't cause leprosy. It's very rich in vitamins A and C, and it's got lots of carbohydrates, which is energy that you need to live. And it's also got protein, help make little amino acids so you get muscles grow big and strong. And in fact, the potatoes are so nice. I feel like I already talked about potatoes. Well, anyway, I'm going to talk about them again because I like potatoes. And a family could survive off 1 acre, and they ate 10, 12 pounds of those things. The Irish, crazy. Oh, can you imagine how big your stomach had to be to eat 10, 12 pounds of potatoes a day? Holy cow. But anyway, they would rotate all these different crops in there, and they would kind of defy what the Bible said. And the Bible said, you got to let that land rest. But they didn't do that. So they were tempting fate. And that's probably one of the reasons why they were so resistant to change, and why it took some of these entrepreneurial type farmers to venture out and risk getting smited by God for defying what the Bible said. I'm not kidding either. That's pretty serious stuff. People took very serious back then. Anyway, 4-field system. Ooh, look at that. Crimson. That's red to you and me. Crimson rhymes with red. And it's clover, crimson and clover, right? And what's that for? Nitrogen fixing. That's right. And anyway, that was important. And you got wheat, barley, and all the other cereal crops that you would use. And more better. All right. So the third or the fourth, depending if we're including manure, which we're kind of not, but the third innovation then is animal husbandry, or selective breeding, as I like to refer to it as. And it was came up with by this guy named Robert Bakewell. And so, like in nature, animals kind of do their own selection, right? And there's that guy that naturalist from England, Charles Darwin. You know what's funny is most of the people that we talk about all through this class. Sorry about that, y'all. There were some kind of technical difficulties, and I had to fix my computer. Done broke on me. Anyway, who was I talking about? Charles Darwin, and figured out that like animals, because of their selection process, naturally will deviate, or not deviate, but like will naturally be attracted to animals that have, especially females. They're attracted to males who are have better survival qualities, and over time, the animals get bigger. It's called evolution and stuff. Well, anyway, I was talking about how like most people we study in this class is English. Like when it comes to inventors and scientists, all these breakthroughs, it's always the English. They live on this little tiny island. Holy cow. Pretty amazing. Anyway, this guy, Robert Bakewell, figured out, well, we're just going to do what Mother Nature does, but we're going to speed it up, and we're going to control who gets to mate and who doesn't. And so anyway, over time, they were able to make these animals get a lot bigger. And if you look at this one right here, look, it's good. Now, I hope you all realize that this cow really ain't that big, because if he was, his little legs, see his little legs right here? They'd like snap just like twigs. So what's the purpose of this? Well, we talked about this before in other, I guess, instances, but what is this an example of? So clearly they're trying to convince people of something that may or may not be true. And in this case, it's not. So what do we call that? Yep. Who? Wait. No, Shantae. You always interrupted. We're going to call him somebody else. Let's call him Gianna. She's a smart girl. I bet she knows the answer. Gianna, what's this an example of? Propaganda. That's right. Anyway, bigger animals. Bigger animals. Okay, so what that means is more meat for their diets. So people are healthier and they live longer and they're not starving to death. And the babies, they're not dying as much. And the old people, well, they live longer. So everything's like getting better. And not only that, but you could sell. Now, people always sold stuff, coming from the animals, whether it was milk or like wool from the sheep. But now they can actually, because the animals are so big, they could sell them for the meat value. So meat became a commodity. That's something that you sell out on the open market. Anyway, it's pretty important stuff. Okay, so what this little here graph here says, over time, you can see the various types of grains for these different countries, okay, going up over time. And what's most impressive is the countries that experience the greatest growth in crop yields. Well, who do you think it is? It ain't Russia, and it ain't Italy. That's right. It's England, Great Britain, and the Low Countries. Okay, so what we start to see is that their grain yields increase by 40 to 1, which it used to be like 5 to 1 or 6 to 1 now. So that's like a bunch of times more than that. I don't know. I'm not real good at math. So anyway, so what we start to see happening is people start figuring out, well, this open field system really isn't very conducive to innovation. So this one fella here, you guessed it, another Englishman, spent a lot of time touring not just England, but continental Europe. And in fact, much of the things that we know about the way people lived in the 18th century comes from Arthur Young. So one of the things that Arthur Young recommended, because he became the Secretary of British Board of Agriculture. I don't know what that means, but that sounds like a pretty important job. And so what he said is, this is wave of the future, and we better, get on with it and hold on with both hands. And we want to allow these farms and these farmers to make all the innovations necessary, okay? And so what they need to be able to do is protect their investments. And if they're fooling around with everybody else in like all these strips of land, open field system, it's not going to work that way. So what they need to be able to do is they got to be able to enclose their land, all right? And be able to protect their investments, okay? And so he was a big proponent for enclosure. Now, enclosure had already been happening for a while, but what his recommendations led to was a speed up, all right? Sped that process up, okay? So here, again, are a lot of the reasons or the disadvantages for the open field system. We already talked about the fact that not all the land is cultivated because the open fields, or one of the fields left fallow, but also look at all the land that's wasted right here because of they had to divide up whose land was who. And so if you add all these little unused pieces of land up, that's a lot of land that could be cultivated. And also, what you got out here? You got the woods. Well, that land's not cultivated neither. And then somewhere, I guess this right here is the pasture land for the animals. Well, that's not being cultivated neither. So, in fact, if this land could be brought under cultivation and these trees be cut down and be brought under cultivation, there's more opportunity for food to be produced. All right, and so it's not good. All right, well, it's not efficient. So they're going to change that. All right, and so what ended up happening is farmers started, enclosing their land. And another thing is, remember those common peasant people, because they're not very smart, and somebody I know once referred to them as ignorant nincompoops, but I would never say anything like that. But they were resistant to change, not just the peasants, but the nobles too. It was those in-between farmers that had maybe more strips of land, and they were the entrepreneurial type, and it was them that really drove this, okay? And also, if they were messing around with animal husbandry, that's a big investment, and they want to be able to control who their animals associate with, so they don't want their prized animals associating with those dirty, skinny, scrawny, diseased, filthy, flea-bitten peasant animals. So you got to prevent that from happening. So what better way than enclose your land, right? So that is what kind of propelled this. And see, so what they start doing is they start building fences, all right, or stone walls. And another thing that they do is they grow these things called hedges, right? And these hedges will grow up real big and tall, and they became like a barrier, an impenetrable barrier. They were so impenetrable, in fact, that during World War II, when the Allies landed in Europe on D-Day, the tanks could not get through the hedges, the hedgerows. Tanks couldn't drive through hedgerows, so they had to blast them with artillery, and that kind of slowed their advance down. And them Germans, the Krauts, would hide behind the hedges, and they would shoot at the Americans and the Allies. Yeah, it's crazy, isn't it? Yep. Anyway, so they began doing that, and a lot of the little farmers started to get squeezed out, and they said, we can't compete with this, so we'll just go ahead and sell our land. And that's exactly what the larger landowners wanted. They wanted to try to get as much land as possible, so they had these big giant farms. Okay, and so there were some though that were more stubborn, and so they refused. And so, well, it was going to take an act of parliament to get these holdout farmers off their land. So that's what this is all about right here. All right. So a lot of these wealthier farmers, who we now refer to as what? They're not nobles, but they're important. And they're in the government. They're in the House of Commons. What's that group of people called? Who I want to call on this time? Well, I don't know. Who should I? All right, well, never mind. I'm not going to worry about it. It's the gentry class. All right, I got to speed up. I'm taking too doggone long. All right, so the gentry class are the ones that could, because this was very self-serving, all right, to get these little holdout farmers, peasants off their land. So they passed laws called the Enclosure Acts, and the Enclosure Act said you have to improve your land. And one of the ways that you would, quote unquote, improve your land, see how I did, air quotes, improve your land was through building fences, and hedges, or stone walls. And most of these farmers, man, remember, they're poor and they don't have any money, so they don't have enough money to buy a bunch of stone or build these. So they didn't, and so they were in violation of the law. And since they were in violation of the law, they had to pay fines. And then they didn't pay their fines, then their land would be foreclosed upon. And guess who would be there? Yeah, the gentry, to try to buy that land. So that was pretty low down, but that's called progress, I guess. So that's kind of controversial. Ooh, let me go back there. Somewhere I heard something about this being very controversial because it propelled a lot of these people, or led to a lot of these peasants to become landless, no longer owning land. So that meant that they had to work as farmhands. Okay, so you remember that, because landless peasants is going to be connected to the Industrial Revolution. All right, so one of the beautiful things about the agricultural revolution is that the vicious cycle of famine and starvation is now broken. All right, and you can see by that chart there, population's going up, 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 up. Which country is this? Russia. Why the heck are they so high? What are them Russians doing? I don't know what they're doing. All right, but the country we were talking about is England. All right, so they go population in 100 years goes from about a little over 5 million all the way up to about 9 million. So we're just going to say it doubles, right? And so all over here, there's a little phenomenon is taking place because the ideas begin to spread. That's called cultural diffusion. Okay, so another reason why the population goes up, I mean, it's not just food, but that's probably the biggest reason, but disease, all right? And, well, we should know this from that first unit, on chapter 11 or something, when we were talking about how, like, people, because they're or starving all the time, they become more vulnerable to the outbreak of disease, like the bubonic plague. Well, guess what? The last time the bubonic plague showed up in Europe was in France, Marseille, 1720. And then, presto, it vanished. Never again to really show up. And they're not really sure why, but they think it has something to do with doing a better job of quarantining those people who were sick. All right. And then the other disease that they finally conquered was smallpox. Do you know that during the 18th century, the 1700s, over 60 million Europeans died? Okay. Well, this fella here, Edward Jenner, guess what? He's an Englishman. Amazing. I don't know, Englishman. How'd they do that? They must put something. They must eat their vitamins or something. I don't know. They're super smart. I don't know what happened. No, they're not really doing so well right now. But anyway, Edward Jenner figured out a way to inoculate people so that they wouldn't get sick. And he's treating this little boy here so he doesn't get smallpox. What he figured out was that these little milkmaids will milk these cows, and there was something called cowpox, and they would develop cowpox all over their hands, and it looked very similar to smallpox, only it didn't kill them, and it wasn't contagious neither. So what he figured out was because of the similarities, and so he studied this over time, that if you take I don't mean be gross here, but if you take some of the matter inside the I don't know what the heck that thing's called, some scab or sore, like if you suck out the pus, like with a needle, not with anything else, but you suck that out, that you got that cowpox virus, and if you would inject that into somebody, that the similarity between that and smallpox was so the similarity was very strong that it prevented people from getting sick. So eventually they were able to eradicate that dreadful disease from Europe because it spread to the rest of, not the disease, but the inoculation. All right. And here, I like this. This is kind of funny. This little political cartoon. And I don't know. You don't have to be too smart to figure this one out, but they don't like it. All right. Here's one of the questions on the study guide. This is the, hold on a second. Got to take a break. Got to drink my Coke Zero. All right. Here we go. Look at this guy right here. Well, first of all, here's Edward Jenner, and he is sticking everybody with the vaccine, right? And she looks scared, right? And I guess all these other people had gotten their shots, and look what's happened to them. Now remember, what's he injecting them with? Cowpox. That's right. And look at this. What the heck? Coming out of this guy's forearm is a cow, and out his rear end too, another cow. And look, that lady, she giving birth to a cow, and this poor gal, a cow's climbing out her mouth, and he's freaking out because he's got horns growing on his head. Holy cow! Look at that guy. Talk about pimples, man. Yeah, you gotta wash your face. He's got a big old. He popped that zit, and out come a cow, and what the heck? You got one coming out of his ear. Holy good night! Look at these people. They all freaked out. Anyway, so what do you think? What do you think the purpose of this political cartoon is, right? People don't like it. They are scared because people don't like change, right? People freak out when you start changing things on them. All right. Anyway, some of the other diseases that people stop, I guess, lesser diseases, typhus and typhoid, and they come from in like, well, I don't know what you call these things, like insects or something. Anyway, they get in the rats, just like the smallpox, or just like the bubonic plague, and nasty old rats bite the farmer, and next thing you know, they're dying. So they figured out ways to improve the water, because if, and this is gross, I don't mean be nasty here, because we're going to talk about this later with cholera, because there was a big cholera outbreak in Europe, killed a bunch of people in the later years of the Industrial Revolution. But like if human waste get in the water supply, and somebody else downstream drinks that contaminated water, that's right, they're going to catch that disease. So that's what this is all about. They had like better water treatment. And another thing was that during the age of absolutism, these big powerful absolute monarchs had the sovereignty and the financing to construct roads, all right? And so they had these big public works projects that are going around, and here in France, they're building this road, okay? Look up there, that's a windmill. Guess what that's used for? Yep, you guessed it, grinding the grain into flour for the bread. But so why would a king want to do that? Well, if there was a famine, he could use the roads to get food, emergency food supplies to the various regions, or in this case, because we're talking about France, they'd be called provinces. And why would he want to do that? Well, because he wants to prevent rebellion and uprisings. So by doing that, he'd prevent that. And also, if he had needed to move his army through, he'd use these roads. All right. So that was one of the things they did. All right. Now we need to change gears, talk about the Industrial Revolution. All right. So basically, it has to do with the way in which things are manufactured. Okay. So things up until this point in time, mid 1700s, everything's made by hand. All right. With simple tools. And that process is going to change. Okay. Machinery to manufacture things is going to become more and more complicated, and it's going to get bigger, and as I said, more complex, and also too big for humans to power by themselves, or even animals to power. So they're going to have to secure a new source of power, and they're going to use water, and then eventually they're going to use steam, and then they're going to use like gasoline, called the internal combustion engine, and that's going to give us electricity. And then later on, because of Einstein, who was, nope, he wasn't English, he was German. But anyway, Albert Einstein figured stuff out about atoms and whatnot, and then they figured out something called fusion, fission. I forget which, but split the atom open and all this energy comes out. And so anyway, that all these different sources of power. But right here is a water mill, all right? And I asked Rashid this earlier, and he was smart enough to answer this. But look, inside, they're grinding. This is, oh, look fancy. Like this thing is connected to some gears, and there's some pulleys here. And I don't think there's a factory, but I think what they're doing is they're grinding grain, right, in the flour, right? Okay. So what ends up happening is they start changing, right? New inventions, new machinery, and the machines can do things faster than people, and they don't get tired neither. All right. So this right here is a definition that you need to be aware of. All right. First, greatly increased output of machine-made goods, starting in England. You guessed it, in the mid 1750s. All right. Let's see, anything else? That's kind of cool. I like that. I like when I see drawings like that. Okay, so the Industrial Revolution begins in Great Britain, and y'all going to need to know a whole bunch of reasons why in England. First off, let's talk about their geography. Okay, well, they got lots of natural rivers and streams, and as such, that allows for, that eases transportation to and fro, and also because they're an island, in a skinny island at that. No matter where you are in England, you're I guess all of Great Britain, for the most part, you're no further than about 70 miles from the coast. So overseas trade and commerce and stuff like that, and selling things to customers, makes it a lot easier that way. Also, geographically speaking, they are blessed with lots of natural resources like coal and iron. And let's see, what else? Okay, so for social, there was a growing population, right, because of food prices dropping because of the output of food, and that meant that the growing population, well, also there was population shifting. People started, because a lot of them farmers didn't need all those farm hands, and so those other farmers who lost their land, remember the landless peasants, they had to go on walkabout and walk all around and try to move to cities and stuff to find work. Okay, so they were able to tap into that labor supply to exploit that labor. All right, and then also because of economics, the people were a little more well off. Okay, because the price of food had gone down, and in fact, they could afford to send their children to school, and they get better educated. And since they're better educated, that's just going to lend itself to making more inventions. And that we know the British and the English were really good at doing. But they had extra money, disposable income, and they could buy things with it. All right. And because everybody wanted to be like the next richer class, everybody was trying to emulate the class higher than them through like, advertising and marketing. People wanted to emulate people from a higher status, social class than you. That like propelled purchasing and trying to keep up with the Joneses, that kind of phenomena, and that's part of the reason why the Industrial Revolution began in Great Britain. And politically, the country is pretty stable internally. They're not having any more revolutions. And let's see, what else? I talked about most of this already. Back to the economics, because of overseas trade and because of the agricultural revolution, you got all these people making money, right? And they what do you do when you have money? You want to make more money, right? So you're willing to invest in other enterprises, okay? And so when people want to build factories, they need investors, and well, there's a plentiful supply of investors, and also the banks are real stable in England, and they're willing to give loans to people and stuff like that. And politically, another thing is not a lot of regulations on, very easy to start up a new business or enterprise of some sort in England. Okay, so first industry is textiles. Now, textiles is clothing. Okay, and the types of clothes that people wore back then was wool, all right, and then something called linen, and that came from something called flax. But anyway, wool comes from sheep. But then because of the American colonies being in a